Premier, we're on the eve of the inauguration, and Canada is seized with the threat of tariffs. We're here in Washington, D.C., you back-to-back meetings. Thanks for jamming me in. Is there any news that you are able to communicate back home? How is it going?
Well, I can tell you we've got a lot of friends in America. I think that every person I've spoken with has either Canadian friends or Canadian neighbors. There's lots of snowbirds down here. There's a really strong awareness of Canada. And I feel like if we build on the relationship that we have developed over not just literally decades, but over a century, I think is a good starting ground to start from. I won't know what the tariff situation looks like until we see what the executive orders look like. But I think we have a very strong case to make about why Canada should get a carve-out. Whatever strategy the president has with regard to tariffs or the rest of the world, Canada is unique. We have an integrated economy. We buy more American products than anyone else in the world. And when you take out energy, we actually have a trade surplus. The Americans have a trade surplus with Canada. We buy more American goods and services from them than they buy from us. So those are the kinds of messages that I'm bringing down here, and I hope it has some impact.
You sound like a foreign minister or an ambassador, yet you're the premier of a province. Can I ask you, is the federal government, is Trudeau's government, is Melanie Joly, is Dominique LeBlanc, are they deployed here? Is there anyone else working the rooms on behalf of Canada, or is it just you and your team?
I haven't seen any Canadians who are here in an official role from the federal government. I don't know if they will tomorrow. I'll be going to the Canadian Embassy as the change to the inauguration has been moved indoors. We'll be watching the inauguration from the embassy, and I'll be able to have more conversations there. But my view has always been, if you're going to be diplomatic, lead with diplomacy, lead with a relationship, lead with common interests, lead with talking about what the Americans benefit from the relationship with Canada. So I've taken a bit of a departure, I think, from our federal counterparts, but I think it's the right one. I think that this is going to be the way that we ensure that the relationship does not get damaged as the federal Liberals are going through their inter-party turmoil. That's the thing I find so distressing, is that they're not taking a Canada First approach. They're taking a Liberal Party First approach. They're turning the Americans and the Trump administration in particular into the bad guys so that they can campaign against them for their own personal political benefit, and that is not good for the country. So we're putting the country first. We're putting the relationship first, and we hope that we end up with a positive outcome.
Chrystia Freeland released her first campaign ad where she emphasized how she and Donald Trump did not get along. And I thought that might sell well with the Liberal Party base, but it's almost as if they want the war so they can campaign against Donald Trump instead of against Pierre Poilievre, and so they can blame economic damage on Trump instead of on themselves. I mean, it's almost too much to consider that they actually want the fight, that they would rather have the fight than fix the border issue.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. I read Robert Lighthizer book because I wanted to understand.
He's a former trade rep?
He was the former trade rep, and he had the closest relationship with Chrystia Freeland because they were across the table from each other, to understand why things went so badly the first time around. And I guess what I'm dismayed by is that they didn't keep up those relationships. It was almost as if they used Donald Trump as a punching bag against Pierre Poilievre for the last 4 years, and then surprise, all of a sudden they're at the table again. And the relationship's been damaged. They should have been working overtime to repair it, and instead they're just doubling down. Our approach has always been very different. We have a trade representative representing Alberta in Washington, and we make friends on both sides of the aisle, because you never know. 1 year it might be a Republican, next year it might be Democrat. You might see a change in the Congress partway through. You have to be able to have friends so that you can make sure that your interests are going to be protected. And I have to say, I haven't seen much of that from the federal government. It's very disappointing.
Let me ask you about the Trump side, because I know that Canada and Alberta have lots of relationships at the state level and even in Congress and the Senate. But Trump is his own man very clearly. We know he's friends with Wayne Gretzky. We know he's friends with O'Leary. But I wonder if he has any friends that know the real deal about Canada economically, and especially about Alberta, and the fact that Alberta sells so much oil to America, frankly, at a discount to world prices. Do you sense that there's someone within Trump's inner circle that you can give real information to? Because the idea of putting a tariff on raw material, unrefined oil, that goes into an American refinery. It just seems so self-defeating from an American point of view. I get the feeling that Trump, if he knew those facts, maybe he would avoid the tariffs. Do you have any connection with the Trump man or his team?
Well, I went last night to the Alberta First policy group. They were having an inauguration event, and this is the interesting thing: is this is a group that formed after Trump left office the first time, and they decided that they were going to put a policy framework around, should he get elected again, what that would look like. And many of the people who they identified through this America First initiative have been tapped to be in the administration. Ooh. And so that gives me a lot of confidence that they found some really solid people who understand their files. I'm particularly encouraged to see Chris Wright, who former CEO of Liberty Energy. He has been tapped as the nominee for energy. I'm very encouraged to see Doug Burgum, who is tapped for the Interior Secretary, which is an enormous ministry that's going to be responsible mostly for pipelines, but he's also the head of the Energy Council. He's got a fantastic relationship as former governor of North Dakota. He understands carbon capture. He understands the energy business in Canada. So there are really solid, thoughtful people like that who are in the administration, and I'll be looking forward to seeing what kind of role they take. But I would say with individuals like that, very close to the decision-making role or in decision-making roles themselves, I think building on those relationships will be very good for Canada.
Let me ask you about Justin Trudeau and Stephen Guilbeault. I have two thoughts about them. One is that they've always been opposed to the oil patch, and they've tried to ban tankers, tried to ban pipelines, tried to use the carbon tax. It's almost as if they're delighted with the prospect of making the oil patch this sacrifice industry. They can do it in the name of saving Canada from Trump, but it's actually been their secret plan all along, that they've always hated the oil patch, and that's why they just happen to come upon it as the sacrifice zone. Again, I don't want to look too much into motive, but these guys have expressed their motives for years. Am I being too dark here?
I want to acknowledge that we do have the Coastal GasLink pipeline that has been built, which will allow us to get our liquefied natural gas to the world. And we do have the Trans Mountain pipeline that was built. But we don't have built is Northern Gateway, which we needed. Energy East, which would have actually helped our eastern neighbors. We don't have $125 billion worth of projects that were so unsettled by the uncertainty that the federal government created that they just shelved their projects. So yes, there have been some minor movements towards increasing the amount of egress, but we could have done so much more. And so I think the problem with the Liberals is that in their moments of honesty, they tell you what they really believe. They say they were going to shut down the oil sands. You've got Stephen Guilbeault, who clearly wants to keep it in the ground. And this is the problem, is that they now have to pivot because we now have an American partner that may want to restart discussions about egress, whether it's Keystone XL or something else. We have an American partner who now wants energy dominance. And the way the Americans get energy dominance is because Canada is able to export to the Americans, and then the Americans are able to export to their friends and allies around the world. The way the Americans get energy security and affordability is because our discounted Canadian oil goes into U.S. refineries so that it can make cheap products with the help of 1.5 million American laborers to value add those products. These are selling features for us. So the federal government recognized that energy could be used as a point of leverage, but not by threatening to sell less, by promising to sell more. And that's why I'm here, is that we want to double our production. We want to double the amount going to America. We want to help them with their aspiration of energy dominance. And I think that that is a strategy that will help all of Canada. If we can say, we are your best friend, neighbor, we realize your aspirations, we can help you achieve them, we can be a partner in global energy security, there's no way that they would tariff Canada. And that's the point that I'm trying to make.
Well, it comes back to ethical oil or conflict oil. They have to choose, and Canadian oil is the most ethical. Listen, I want to be very respectful of your time, and I really appreciate you jamming me in. But I want to talk one more minute about something that I think started as a joke or a trolling and is now a little bit serious. Donald Trump, when he first met with Trudeau at Mar-a-Lago, made a joke about the 51st state. But I think he saw that Trudeau was thin-skinned about that, so he's made a few tweets about that. I think what started as a joke, unfortunately, could become – I think there could be a unity crisis if, not Trump, but if Trudeau tries to use the oil patch as a weapon. And I think that he could drive Alberta away from Canada. And for the first time ever, I think you have an American who's willing to pull. So you've got Trudeau pushing and the Americans pulling. I'm not saying that Alberta would leave or join, but I'm saying the polls suggest that a number of Albertans or a number of Canadians are open to the idea. And if Trudeau went full national energy program, I think you could have an actual unity crisis as bad as Quebec separatism. And I think it would be as much Trudeau pushing as Trump pulling. What do you think about that?
I'm not disagreeing with you. That's why I keep telling them to knock it off. Stop talking about putting export tariffs. Ottawa export tariffs on Canadian energy. I mean, I can do the math along with anyone else. You take $150 billion worth of exports, you slap on a 25% tariff, you're now looking at $40-50 billion worth of revenues that would go to Ottawa to be distributed to every other province except for the province it generated in. That sounds like an equalization program to me, and it sounds a heck of a lot like a national energy program that his dad put in. And we know the devastation that caused. Unemployment rose to 12.5%. People lost houses, people lost jobs, people lost their lives. That's one of the things I don't think that this government realizes, and this particular prime minister realizes, about how devastating the national energy program was to the psyche of Alberta. And he's playing with fire when he talks about that. I mean, it's one thing if there's a tariff on American orange juice and we all have to pay more for our orange juice. That's, I think, a price we're all willing to pay. Let's, esprit de corps, we're all in this together. If we have to do some countervailing tariffs, fair enough. But you can't single out a single province and a single industry and demonize it and victimize it this way without having a reaction. And I think he's really playing with fire. It's why I didn't sign the communique. I'm just not prepared to agree to anything that is going to damage Alberta jobs, Alberta economy, and our very important vital relationship with the United States. And I think that he's being very cavalier if he thinks that he can press those buttons and it won't have consequences. It's very irresponsible, but this is part of the reason I've called for an election. It's because we have a prime minister who doesn't have a mandate, and now we have a Liberal Party in the middle of a race who are making political decisions for their own personal benefit, and I think sacrificing the interests of Canada as a whole. And it's not acceptable, which is why we need to be down here representing an alternative view. We think the responsible view, and we hope that it results in an improved relationship and benefits all of Canada.
I sense that Doug Ford might be willing to go to the polls with this as an issue. He said, well, I don't have a mandate on this. Someone came, I live in Toronto, some conservatives came knocking on my door, some provincial conservatives. I think an election is coming there. Would you consider having an election where defending Alberta's oil patch and promoting it was the critical issue? If this crisis came, if Trudeau tried to get the other premiers to gang up on Alberta to make it a sacrifice zone, would you consider going to the polls to get a mandate to fight back hard?
I have a mandate to fight back hard. I ran the last election. I'm putting Alberta first. I'm doing exactly what I said I would do, and people shouldn't be surprised by that. I'm hoping, what I would like is some stability. I would like a federal election so we can get somebody in there with a mandate for 4 years. Other premiers are closer to an election than I am, but this is very dangerous to torch 100+ year relationship for a personal political benefit of a matter of a couple of weeks or a couple of months. We're just not prepared to do that. We're building the relationship now. We know that this is a relationship that is going to last not just the 4 years of the Trump administration mandate, but beyond that. And we want to make sure that we have those relationships on both sides of the aisle, which is why we're taking a diplomatic approach, not a political one. And we're very dismayed to see how this is escalating, and I think in danger of really damaging the relationship permanently. We don't want that to happen.
Last question. Who are your allies? Do you have any allies amongst the premiers? Do you have any allies? You mentioned some American allies, but other people. I mean, I hate this ganging up on Alberta. It's the worst caricature of an anti-Alberta bigotry that I grew up with in Alberta. And I had thought it had passed. Do you have any friends in Canada on this issue, allies?
I would say that what I like about the COF table, Council of the Federation, is when we come together as a group of premiers and we write a communique, We go through it line by line to make sure everybody is comfortable with what's in it. We make accommodations for each other because when we go out with a statement, we want to make sure that everybody is in agreement on it. That didn't happen with the First Minister's meeting, and I think that's probably a reflection of Justin Trudeau's style. He didn't care that I wasn't in agreement, and he didn't try to find language where we would be in agreement. I think we have a lot of common ground. I think that when I'm out and talking about how we defend Canada, I can talk just as well about the germanium, which is a critical mineral from British Columbia, and gallium, which is a critical mineral from Quebec. I can talk about nuclear in Saskatchewan, and I can talk about how we've got critical minerals in our northern territories, how the agri-food industry is integrated, and we can talk about all of the ways in which we can benefit. I happen to lead with oil and gas because it is the most important export Canada has. 25% of our exports are oil and natural gas. Yeah. We also know that that is what the Americans are looking for now for energy security and energy dominance. But I would say that by leading with the things the Americans care about, we'll be able to, I think, reset the relationship for all of Canada. So I promote my colleagues and friends and the economies of the other provinces as well. But we simply will not allow Alberta to be singled out by an Ottawa-based tax that is generating revenue to be distributed in the rest of the country. That is not a game that we want to see played. We want to make sure that we can find areas of common agreement. But let's just wait and see what happens. Are we even going to have tariffs? If we are, what do they look like? Is it possible we can avoid them if we demonstrate that we take border security seriously? Is it possible we can avoid them if we meet our NATO commitment? Is it possible we can avoid that if they see that we are a partner in national security for them? Those are the things that we should be leading with, as opposed to saber waving and acting as if we can win a tariff war. We can't win a tariff war with an economy that's 10 times our size. We've got to take a different approach. We've got to take a diplomatic approach first. That's what I'm doing.
Premier, I know you're so busy. You got to get right back to those meetings. Very grateful for you to jam in some questions from us. We're rooting for you. In fact, Rebel News, we set up a campaign called handsoffalberta.com. And it's not just Hands Off Alberta. This is for the whole country. So we'll keep you posted how that goes.
Okay. Thank you so much for that.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
There you have it. Premier Danielle Smith sitting down with us on the eve of the inauguration of President Donald Trump.